Hello and welcome to my latest demo on Azure Stack deployment on a Windows Server 2016 VM which has been configured to host nested VMs, right? So this is interesting. Microsoft has added a new feature on Windows 2016 hypervisor where you could nest VM on a you can create VMs on a VM kind of a story. So that's pretty cool, and we're going to take advantage of that feature set in today's demonstration. We'll be talking about Microsoft Azure Stack Deployment Kit, which is the topic for today. And many of you may already know me, but let me take this opportunity to introduce me to those folks who are watching it for the first time. My name is Atul Raizada. I work for a Microsoft US partner, Logicalis. I'm a P-Seller Cloud Solution Architect, and I do this as my hobby to provide some kind of a community service. I share the information that I have, and today I'm going to try to share the information on whatever I know about Azure Stack. It may not be as good as I hope and as I wish, but I think I have enough to share with you which could make you get acquainted with Azure Stack, and the questions that you're asking, or your colleagues asking, or your management is asking, you may be better off after watching this video. That's what is my hope, and let's get into that, right? So the first thing is that we need to talk about some basic Azure Stack concepts. So when we talk about Azure Stack in production environment, Azure Stack has to be deployed on the Microsoft certified hardware. And when I say Microsoft certified hardware, almost all large OEM vendors, whether this is HP, Lenovo, or Dell, or Cisco, UCS, they all have been certified to deploy Azure Stack. And as far as I understand, with my memory that I had been with Microsoft Azure Stack boot camp about a year back in Redmond, Azure Stack would be deployed by your vendor, right? So if you buy it from HP, the HP engineers would deploy Azure Stack for you, and you would have ready box to go, right? So that's the scenario. But as long as you're not ready to buy the hardware from your vendor and you still want to learn Azure Stack and get acquainted with Azure Stack, this particular demonstration might be a good option for you, where you have the ability to deploy Azure Stack Deployment Kit on a Windows Server 2016 VMs, and that's what we are going to do. So when we deploy Azure Stack, there are two different scenarios. One is a connected versus a second scenario, which is disconnected. Most often we would end up deploying Azure Stack in a connected state, and when I say connected, those environments, those organizations that have internet connectivity, we are deploying in their production data center. That's where the Azure Stack Connected comes into picture. But there are also some use cases where that may not be a possibility, and internet connectivity may not be an option, and that's where we deploy Azure Stack in a disconnected state. A use case may be a shipping line who has their ships deep in the ocean and they don't have internet connectivity. They still need to operate, they still need to do their work, they still need infrastructure as a service, they need different components, and Azure Stack could be a good fit there. Oil drilling companies who are drilling oil, exploring oil deep underneath the ocean where internet is just not a possibility, and Azure Stack would fit absolutely fine there. Same is the case with mines, right? So I hope you understand the premise and the concept of connected versus disconnected. And when we talk about Azure Stack, as I said, Azure Stack, for those folks who are hearing Azure Stack for the first time, Azure Stack is Microsoft Azure that you could deploy in your data center, right? It may not have all the feature sets that you are used to see in a Azure public cloud, but it would provide you a substantial set of services on-prem in your data center that you can manage, and you can offer these services to your end user community, right? And that is the premise of Azure Stack. So pretty much Azure that you deploy, you control in your data center is Azure Stack. You could use it as a private cloud, you could use it as a hybrid cloud, you can use infrastructure as a service, you can also use platform as a service, and there are multiple ways to take the advantage of Azure Stack. The good news here is that if you are familiar with Azure Stack and you have been using, if you are familiar with Azure and you have been using Azure, this would be an extension of Azure in your data center, which makes a lot of sense in terms of going forward, in terms of the IT roadmap of many organizations. Now, moving forward here, when we talk about personas here, in terms of the personas, the Azure Stack comes into two different operations mode. One is a cloud operator, which is pretty much, in general, you can call it an admin mode, where you have the king of the kingdom, you are the boss, and you manage all the operations of Azure Stack as at administrator level or administrative level, right? So you can do anything that you like, create subscriptions, tenants, plans, services, offers to your end user. And then the second persona is the tenant. And tenant, when we refer to tenant is user side, where when you provide these services to the user community, they are referred as tenant, right? So you could have different tenant, and hypothetically an example could be your HR department is one of your tenant. Sales department could be another tenant, right? And then you give them the required services that they can leverage to do their day-to-day operations or day-to-day work, right? And the difference here is that when you use Azure public cloud, you have one single common URL pretty much, right? But in this case, the cloud operator, which is the administrator, has a different portal, and the users, which are the tenant, they have a different portal which is showing on your screen, right? But I think this is pretty straightforward. Then comes the identity, which is an important and integral part of any solution that we put together. And when we talk about identity or identities, if you're using a connected Azure Stack, then Azure AD is your identity source, or authentication, identity, authorization, all is being managed by Azure AD. So pretty much to deploy a connected Azure Stack, you need an Azure Active Directory. On the contrary, if you are in a disconnected mode, obviously you don't have connectivity to Azure Active Directory, you don't have internet connectivity, then you can use Active Directory Federation services, which could tie back into your on-prem Active Directory in that disconnected state, and you can function and manage identities through that. Of course, that portion is not in the scope of today's presentation or demos, but we would be concentrating and focusing on deploying Azure Stack in a connected space. Then comes the concepts of the regions, services, plans, offers, subscription. And this is also, the table is self-explanatory, where you see how this is being offered. The regions, when you deploy Azure in an organization which has been distributed geographically over multiple regions, you could offer these services to different regions. You can combine the services into offers and then in the plans, and then plan could be sent as an offer and as a subscription, and the delegated subscriptions to the end user community, right? That's the whole premise. And I hope in my demo you would see all of this. You will see the cloud operator, you will see the tenant, you will also see all these regions, services, plans, offers, and subscriptions too. Having said that, because we are deploying the Azure Stack Deployment Kit, we may not be able to see multiple regions choice here, because Azure Stack Deployment Kit only gives you one region, and that is called as a local. So that's the limitation of Azure Stack Deployment Kit, and I just want to mention it to you guys. With that, let's see what are our prerequisites to deploy Azure Stack on a Windows 2016 VM. Obviously, we need an Azure subscription. Obviously, we need Azure Active Directory because we are running into connected space, and we obviously need rights on the Azure Active Directory. Internet connectivity, no brainer, and the hardware requirement. This is critical piece of this demo, right? So making sure that you follow this hardware requirement and do not compromise on that, because keep in mind that the deployment would take 8 to 10 hours, right? And if somehow you miss any of these requirements, then the deployment will fail. and you don't want to rerun it multiple times and extend the deployment and installation window and cause pain to yourself. So very carefully make sure that your operating system disk is about 200 gig. Actually, when I ran it and I ran into an issue, it was looking for 180 gig. That's what I saw in the PowerShell when I was running it. Then you need 4 disks of minimum of 140 gig in space. Now, because we are using here in a VMware environment, right? So, the Hyper-V environment. In that case, these disks, you also have to make sure that when you connect the disk, and you will see in the demonstration, you leave them offline, and Azure Stack installation PowerShell would take care of it. Having said that, this is a minimal requirement. I would strongly recommend that you over provision it, because if you start downloading the from Azure in the market space, then you would need more space to get those VM templates downloaded, right? So whether you're using Linux or Windows or SQL or Ubuntu or whatever, so plan it carefully, right? That's what is more important. You definitely need 12 physical cores of processor. There is a challenge with this when you are deploying on a VM. We will tackle it once we get into the demo. And you need at least 98 gig of RAM. If you are going to plan to use platform as a service, then you need at least 128 gig of RAM. Hyper-V enabled with Slack support. That's what Windows 2016 Hyper-V server that we are going to use today, that is supported. We need a Windows Server 2012 R2 certification for the required NICs. You don't need any specialized features. And because these would be the virtual NICs here, so we really don't need to worry about it, right? So that's our prerequisite for deploying the Azure Stack deployment kit. Now, if my memory is helps me here, there's one more thing that I like to mention to you. If you are planning to deploy it in your production environment, there is in my viewpoint, unless Microsoft has changed their stand, if you have multiple ways of deploying. You can buy a 4-node HyperV Azure Stack, or 8-node or 12-node. The truth of the matter here is that if you go with the 4 nodes hypothetically, and then you realize that you're running out of resources and you need to change it to the 8 nodes, that's just not a possibility. You got to redeploy everything. So in my viewpoint, if you're planning for production, you make sure that you evaluate your possible workload carefully and plan your nodes appropriately. That's number one. Number two, that you also need to take into account when you're planning it, that Azure Stack would consume the resources equivalent to 1 node out of your 4 node or 8 node, whatever you're using, right? Azure Stack deployment. So it does not mean that it is exclusively using 1 node, because that's not the point I'm making. Out of the 4 nodes, let's say you have got compute and storage. Let's say for hypothetically you have got 2 terabytes of storage distributed 500 gig each, right? So it will almost consume the 500 gig of storage to just deploy Azure Stack, and then some portion of memory and CPU as well. So planning of Azure Stack deployment in terms of the hardware and resources and capacity planning, you might find some documentation and article around with Microsoft you can dive into. But make sure that when you're using a 4-node cluster, that means resources equivalent to 1 node is already being used by Azure. So you're left with 3 node worth of resources, right? So if you're using 14, whatever memory and whatever processor, you have to be very careful about it. So that's what, just a piece of advice, unless Microsoft has changed it. And if Microsoft is watching this video, please correct me, and I will make sure that I make the necessary changes in my demo. With that, we are ready to get into the live demo. What I have also done here is that I have created some PowerShell scripts that would make your deployment go simpler and easier. And I also have the link here for downloading the Azure Stack Deployment Kit, the latest version here. You would also see these links in the description of my YouTube video, and hopefully you will find them useful. With that, we just get into the live demonstration. So folks, if you are watching it, you have in front of you a HyperV server, which is a Windows 2016 running on an HP platform. And this is what it is. So I have got 144 gig of RAM here. I have got the storage point of view. You might not see here is I got 418 gig of C drive, and I have got 935 gig of 1.95 terabyte of storage on the system. I have the first step that in my viewpoint that you need to do is to create a VM. And when you create a VM here, in my scenario here, it is an Atul AZ stack. That's the VM that's already deployed and running. And you really need to carefully look into that, what is the configuration of this VM, right? So if you look into the memory, I have given it 100 gig of memory because I only have 124. And then I have given it 12 cores of processors here. And if you look into, when you initially deploy, you do not attach any hard disk, right? So you create a VM without a hard disk. You go with all this configuration, making sure that you have got 12 cores, 12 virtual vCPUs. You have got at least 96 or 100 gig RAM that I have, and don't attach any hard drive at this point, right? Just get the VM ready. Once you have the VM configured and ready, then what we need to run is a PowerShell that you will see in my link, and that is the nested VM PowerShell. Obviously, you have to have a network connectivity. Put the name of your VM. In my space, it is this. If you are using a different, of course, you don't want to use my name. So whatever VM name that you are using, replace it with this name here, and then that's all you need to do. And execute this PowerShell script at elevated privilege, and it would create that VM. It would convert the VM as a nested VM. It will have the capability of hosting VM on a VM, right? Basically, what I intend here is now the Atul AZ stack, which is a VM, has the capability of hosting more VMs. That's what is a nested VM scenario, right? That's the first step. Now you need to create these 4 hard drives. You could do it 2 ways. Either you can manually do it, or if you want to create them, and those are the fixed size drives. So if I go with this PowerShell script here, if you see here, that is going to create these 4 hard drives, and it is going to attach to the VM here too, right? So again, if you are changing the name of the VM, just change the VM here, whatever the path that you have on your system, change the path for the hard drives, and it will create those 4 drives, and it will attach those 4 drives to your VM that we have created in the step number 1, right? Very, very straightforward, right? And those PowerShell scripts would be available to you in the description section of the YouTube video. Okay. Now, once we have done that, the next very important step is to download the binaries for Azure Stack Deployment Kit. So what I did here is that I deployed it, I downloaded it here. If you see the stack kit, and it will bring down, and this is where your again, this is about 60 gig, I believe, if I remember correctly. So we need that much of space and time to download the Azure Stack Deployment Kit, right? So right now it's a 42.5 gig, and when you download it, once the download is completed and finished, then you would obviously, it would ask you to run the executable. And when you run the executable, it will combine all these temporary bin files and create a VHD or a VHDX to be precise, which is called as a cloudbuilder.vhdx, right? This is the VHDX that we will be use, or this is the hard drive that we would use as an operating system hard drive for the deployment of Azure Stack Deployment Kit, right? So what I have done here, I picked up this particular this particular hard drive, and I have copied into my here and use that VM as here, right? I attach the VM here. So on the IDE, this is where I configure that cloud builder.vhdx. Now you would assume that you are ready to go and start working on it. Now there is one more step still left. This particular VHDX is only 26 gig, and when you create that, in my experience, it would create a 80 gig VHDX or 80 gig virtual hard drive. And as I mentioned in my PowerPoint there, that you need to have around 200 gig of the space on this hard drive. So you need to expand this hard drive to 200 gig before you start working on it, right? So now I have already done that. This is already a 200 gig hard drive, or 180 gig almost. So you do not want to leave this step, because if you don't, it's going to haunt you during the deployment process. Make sure that you take care of this step and make sure that this hard drive is at least around 200 gig. Just copying this hard drive over here would make it 80 gig, right? So just a piece of advice for you, which will avoid some frustration to you down the road. Once you have done that, obviously you will launch the VM, and this VM is almost already done. So you will go with the initial wizard of typing country, region, and blah blah blah, and typing your password here. Remember that password would be used throughout this process, so that password is very important. You keep a note of it. Once that is all done and your VM has successfully rebooted, you maybe assign the license as well, so to avoid any future licensing issues, and then log on to this VM. Obviously this is already deployed, but what would happen here, when you come back here, you would go into there would be a folder here called as a cloud deployment, right? This is the one, that's where we will operate from. Now before you do that, obviously you would go through your normal process of renaming your machine, right? Going into the server manager, making sure that you have the internet connectivity, making sure that you have the right IP address, making sure that you have disabled the IE setting. So I just want to make sure that we don't miss that step here. So what I'm saying here is you'll go here, change the machine name here to whatever name you are working with. Then you will also disable the IE setting here, security configuration. I'm not doing anything on the firewall, so I left it the way it is because I didn't know what this machine is trying to do, right? And assigned by DSCP, right now the IP addresses are assigned by DSCP. I'm not even touching it. Now there is a issue with this DSCP assignment. If you don't have a DSCP or you have a DSCP, you will also see here in my file storage that I have got those 4 drives. I hope it shows that, right? But it shows as one single volume here, because initially when you would come in here prior to deployment, they would all show as an offline drives, and don't do anything about it. Just leave them the way it is, and then Azure Stack Deployment Kit would take care of it, right? So make sure that you take all these required steps. You have renamed your machine and IP addresses, IE setting, and once you are good to go, then what you need to do here is in the cloud deployment, and this folder is populated right now. So when you would come initially, you may not see all these folders that you are seeing right now. So don't get shocked or surprised when you start deploying it in your environment. Oh my God, something has gone wrong. No, initially you would not have all these folders, but you will have this folder, setup folder, right? In the setup folder, you have a PowerShell script called as install Azure Stack POC. This is the one that we're going to use and deploy. And as I said, many of your folders are missing. There is one crucial step that you have to be careful before you start working and understand that. Otherwise, you're going to run into the rerun scenario that I have mentioned before, right? So now what you will do here is that let me run the command for you, or type the command, and I'll come back to you in a second. So folks, before I show you the command or PowerShell script, how to execute it, I just want to make sure that we also run the ASDK PreChecker PS1 that you will see in my link here in the link that I'm going to give in the YouTube. Run this and it would check the readiness of your VM, and it will report in advance if it finds any issues with your current hardware, right? So it's important that you run ASDK PreChecker.ps1 and making sure that all your required hardware is good to go, right? And you pass all the tests. You will see something like this. So when you would run that script to check your hardware, obviously you will get this warning about your virtual machine. You can definitely ignore that, but other than that, it should pass all your tests and making sure that you're good to go, right? So this is an important test that you want to run it, and once you have ensured that your test has passed except for this virtual machine warning, then you can go ahead and go to the next step of executing that PowerShell script, right? So let's get there. So I hope you could read this, and let me try to make sure I can make it the fonts a little bigger here to make it visible. I think now this should be visible. So what we did here, we changed the directory to the cloud deployment setup, and then we are running install Azure stack poc.ps1. Remember, there is another one which is just install Azure stack. That's not the one that you want to execute. We want to install, we want to launch install Azure stack poc.ps1, right? Remember that. And then because it could be frustrating at the bottom if your DHCP doesn't allow or assign the IP addresses correctly. So it's good to do this right here. And I think I have to do one more thing here. That net IPv subnet of your network, the net IP default gateway, I think I'm missing here. Let's just do it together one more time, right? So making sure that we are doing it right here. Hold on. So that's my net IP address here. 133.115. Then comes the net IP version 4 default gateway, 172.17.133.1. Then comes DNS forwarder. I just make sure that, because if it doesn't do right, then you would not be able to connect to internet. So don't undermine the importance of these switches here in PowerShell, because if somehow you screw up or your DHCP doesn't work properly, you will not be able to connect over the internet, and all the deployment would go into a disaster, right? So that's why it's, in my viewpoint, it's safer to do that. I'm gonna do the DNS forwarding here to my DNS server here in my lab, and right, the next command that I'm gonna use here is especially important for those customers or those users who have more than one Active Directory in their tenant. I strongly recommend, even if you have one, just use this switch here. And my Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, is and remember, this is not changeable, right? So be very careful about it, because down the road it may have some issues that I actually experienced it based on what kind of an Azure Active Directory and what kind of an Azure subscription or Azure tenant you are using, right? So you could have an Azure tenant as a pay-as-go, you could have an Azure tenant as a part of your EA, or you could have an Azure tenant being provided through your CSP, a cloud solution provider, right? It has an implication in activation and registration of Azure Stack. So making sure that you are using the right Azure Active Directory here, right? And probably once we go to the registration part, I would explain you those three options more clearly. But that's all, folks, that you need to do, right? Obviously, I have already executed this PowerShell command, so there's no sense of running this PowerShell command again. But once you run this PowerShell command, what's going to happen is that it's going to start working, and the first thing that you would see that it would start populating this folder, the cloud deployment folder. You still need to do one very important task, right? Otherwise this is gonna fail, and that's not written in any documentation, so please take a proper attention to that. Once you have ran it, and initially you would not see the roles folder, but now once you have executed and it's still being run, that PowerShell is still running, you will go to this roles and you will go to the folder called the physical machines, and you will go to the folder called tests, right? Here is your file. This is your key friends. If you don't change it, then this installation is not going to go through, because it is meant to be deployed on a physical machine, and here we are deploying it on a virtual machine. So we need to tweak this PowerShell, otherwise when it comes to the bare metal check, it would fail that this is not a physical machine, and you don't want to go through that, right? So open this file. I think that's a line number 508, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to search for this particular line, is virtual machine. Right, this is 134. This is not the one. 528, right? That's what I thought. So now you see here, $physical machine is virtual machine should be, right? If you open your file, it should be showing $false. You need to come here and change it to $true. Again, when you would open the file first time here, default file would show $false, and you need to change it to $true so that your installation can continue on a virtual machine. Without this particular change, the installation would not work. It will fail. You don't want to go through that, because that could be a little bit, or maybe very painful down the road if you start going into the rerun possibility. The second thing that also you need to do, that if you even do that, it is going to fail on the processor count. So though you have got the 12 cores like I showed you here, if I show you here, you have 12 cores here, 2 sockets, but it's the PowerShell script is not going to recognize them as the 12 cores. So we need to tweak this file further down, and what I'm going to do here, and watch very carefully folks, this is very important to watch and note it, because this is going to avoid a lot of frustration to you. So I'm going to pull that line and show you. So now we're going to search for this line, $physical machine processor numbers of enabled cores, right? And we need to search for this. Now if you see here, this would not be 0 in your original file. This would say $local machine name or something, right? Now you need to change this to 0. If you don't change it, you're gonna fail it. Again, very important task folks, this value should not be less than 0. Whatever you have in your original file, you change it to less than 0 and you're good to go. These are the 2 important tweaks, and once you have tweaked this file, the bare metal.ps1 file, then you're good to go, right? So the PowerShell script is still running. We have fixed the bare metal.test.ps1 file so that the installation goes smooth. But at this time, it would also ask you for the admin credentials, which is the admin credentials that you have on this box. And after you type the admin password, it would also ask you for a time server. The time server, you have to pick up a time server from the internet, the NIST server, and then type the IP address of that time server, enter it, the installation would continue. This would happen right away after you execute this command. So that is going to happen before even you go and modify the bare metal.ps1 in my viewpoint, right? So make sure that you have time server IP address ready, and obviously you need to type the password here. Now, if once you have gone through that, you have typed the admin password, you have typed the temp server, you have modified the bare metal.ps1, it's going to go through this installation process, and in few minutes it will ask you for the credentials for Azure Active Directory. You type the Azure Active Directory credential, and that's where your task almost ends. Now it will take about 8 to 10 hours to finish the installation, so you can go and relax. There are a lot of steps happening at this time, and it's going to create a tons of VMs, tons of, like, even for domain controller, even for the BGP router, gateways, remote access services, identity management, ADFS servers, you name it, right? So it's going to constantly keep creating, and that's why it takes a lot of process. And many of you who are familiar with GIA, or just enough administration, and DSC, the desired state of configuration or desired state configuration, Azure Stack uses that heavily. So if you are watching that process here, installation process, you would see that it is enabling the GIA endpoints, it is enabling the desired state of configuration. Pretty sweet stuff. And at some point I would also do a demonstration on GIA, as well as I already have done on PAM, but GIA is the one that is pending on my side. Just enough administration. Those folks who do not understand JEA, it's just enough administration. Pretty powerful technology, and I would create another demo for that. But this is going to continuously keep going on. Take 8 to 10 hours, relax, come back and watch, and make sure that the installation is complete, right? So it may take 8 to 10 hours. And once the installation is complete, then we need to run to the post migration task, or post deployment, sorry, not post migration, post deployment task. And let's jump into the post deployment task right away. So the post deployment task number one, folks, is to deploy the Azure Stack PowerShell. And again, in my link that you will see at the bottom, you will see a PowerShell script which is install Azure Stack ps.ps1. This you would download it and execute it at the elevated privileges from PowerShell. This would install the required Azure Stack PowerShell, so I have made it some easier for you guys. And the second task that we need to do is excuse me, to download the Azure Stack tools, which is also, you have a PowerShell here. You can go and create a folder where you would download the Azure Stack tools, change the directory to that particular folder, and then execute Azure Stack tools.ps1. It would create the required Azure Stack tools in that folder, right? So if I show you in my lab here, I have actually copied here somewhere. Right here, Azure Stack tools.master. This is an important folder that we would be using for future registration purposes, right? So now we assume that you have executed successfully the PowerShell, and you have also successfully executed the and downloaded the Azure Stack tools, right? So now we're good to go. The next step is to ensure that that all our installation is successful, and for that you would run the following commands here. If I can show you, so you would run this command, enter PS session computer name, and from the folder here, computer name, you could run it from any folder, to be honest, and run this command. It may take a few minutes because it's going to go through and pass through all the Azure Stack deployments, so don't just get impatient here. It may take 15-20 minutes before it show you the final results here, and make sure that this test has been passed. Once this test has been passed, that means now we are ready to register the Azure Stack, right? And that's an important task. So let's go there. So before we go to the registration process, and remember that this registration process would allow you to download items from the marketplace directly from Azure unless we do this registration complete, and this also has implication on the billing process. So before we get into the registration process, it's the perfect time to go to the admin portal, right, to the cloud operator model that we discussed earlier. So go and launch the browser, and then you would paste this particular URL, and once you do that, you have to sign up with your Azure AD credentials, and then here you go. I think it will take Azure AD credentials most likely. I forgot whether it takes Azure AD credentials or your credential or the credentials that you're using on this system. Let me see if I can do it again and copy. I forgot. Sorry. Yeah, it will ask you for the credentials for your Azure Active Directory, and once you do that and it will accept it, then you're ready to go ahead and use your portal. Still, though you have the portal access to you, so what is missing here is still, so let's try to go to the portal first. Voila, this is your Azure stack, friends. This is what probably you have been trying to get there. And I think if you have the resources, if you have a Hyper-V and VM, then it's not that hard to get and start learning about Azure stack and playing around it, right? I hope that would be very helpful. But one thing that will not be possible, that if you go to the marketplace management, if you go this now without running the registration, you will not have this button enabled, and it will say you first register it. So we still have to complete that process in order to be able to be registered with the, so in order to be able to download the stuff from Azure Marketplace, right? So what is that step? So I'll give you a PowerShell script, and that is the register Azure Stack PS1. This you would run it again at the elevated privileges. And one thing that I would like to discuss with you here is the billing model here, right? Now this is important, as I mentioned earlier, that depending on your Azure tenant, that what kind of a payment model or billing model you have. You could have Azure tenant as pay as go, where you have been swiping credit card, or you can have Azure tenant being used as a part of your enterprise agreement, or you could also have Azure as a part of your provided through your CSP. Now, if you are using in a development mode, that means for those customers that are using it pay as go, this is the only option for them. Because if you try to run pay as use or capacity, there are two other options, right? You can use as a pay as use, or you can use as a based on capacity. Now those two options would not work if you are paying through your credit card. If you have an enterprise agreement, then you could use either the capacity or pay as use, right? And if you have a CSP, then you can use pay as use. So this is the implication of this billing model here. Once again, if you are paying to a credit card, you are in a testing phase, the development is the right option. You also have pay as use, and that option is possible only if you are a EA customer or you are a CSP customer, right? And capacity is only possible on the EA. So CSP, you cannot use the billing model as a capacity. This particular script, final step would take about 10 minutes to register and get all the required keys and get it ready. In general, give and take about 15 minutes or 20 minutes to run this script and complete this script. Once this is done, then you are good. That means your deployment is now completed in my viewpoint, right? And then you can go, and again, you might need all the storage and all that we have planned it. And then you can start downloading the stuff from Azure, different templates, different stuff that you want to bring it into your Azure stack, right? and here you go. So you have got different stuff. Sorry, I just refreshed it. Let's show. Right, so you have got all kind of VMs, Ubuntu, Linux, free SQL Server, right? You have got machine learning, you have got SQL Server, different types of SQL. So like you see in a regular Azure, right? And I already downloaded one VM here, right? So you can go into MongoDB and all that good stuff. And if you keep going down, you should have Windows VMs too, right here. Okay, SQL right here. So you have got Windows 2016, 2012, blah blah blah, and you download it, and then you're ready to start deploying the VMs, which will deploy it just for an demonstration purposes right here, right? So now this is your code area. Again, you need storage to get these VHDs or these templates downloaded. You can create your own templates, and then you can also, as I discussed earlier in the concepts model, you can create your offers here, and you can create your plans, you can create your subscriptions and all that good stuff, right? So let's say we create a new offer here, and very familiar interface that you have all been used to with the Azure public cloud. And I just use as a demo, resource name demo. I already created a resource group, right? So I should have here resource group here. That's what I created here. I don't think I need to tell you how to create a resource group. The base plans, I can add a plan here, and I can again call is demo plan, right? And the services, what services you want to offer to this users, right? So I can give them Microsoft Compute, I can give them Key Vault, I can give them storage, I can give them Microsoft subscriptions, right? And I can give them Microsoft networking. I have Key Vault as well, what the hell, right? Create, select, create. Now you can also do the services. I already chosen it. This is the option that gives you the quota. I can use the default here, or I can define a quota here too, right? Unlimited, good. Microsoft Network, create new quota or give you a default quota, right? So let's see what happens here if I say plus. So you can give them a machine, all that good stuff here, right? So I'm not going to go into all of them, otherwise this demo is going to go very lengthy, but I just want to show you what your options are, right? So that when you start provisioning it and start giving it to your tenant, which we discussed earlier, tenant is your user model, right? So then you have this option that, hey, I'm only going to allow you that many VMs or that many networks or that many IP addresses. I'm right now leaving it to default. Same is the case with the subscriptions, right? Default provider is fine. That's the default one. And as I said, because this is an Azure Azure Stack deployment kit, I don't have the options of region here. This is automatically picking up the local here, right? This is the one that I mentioned earlier. Microsoft Azure Storage local. Let's see what we have here. Create a new quota, and you have again all those options that you can do. Right, whatever you need to define. Total number of storage account. I'm just not doing it. This is just a demo. Oops, storage, I have to choose something here, though it's not going to let me do that. Okay, Microsoft Compute, again you can do your quota here for this particular user group. right? How many machines, so that this doesn't go overbearing, and that's pretty cool, I guess, right? So I'm not doing here anything fancy, just showing you what you can do. And select plan to add to the offer, and now our new offer is ready, right? I'm gonna create it. Perfect. So you have that offer here, and then if you go, I already showed you how to download the different objects from marketplace from directly from Azure. Let's say the virtual machine, and you have the option to create a virtual machine. Now I just want to take a minute here, guys, and I just want to make sure that I share my ideas, and I may not be 100% right here, but my assumption here and my way of thinking, and again, if anybody from Microsoft is watching, please send your remarks here. Azure Stack is not a lift and shift for your existing VMs in your data center, your on-prem data center. If that's the premise that you are planning to deploy Azure Stack, perhaps that's not where it fits into as a use case, right? It's not just to deploy the VMs, because you already have that in your data center. You are using a hypervisor. Your data center is full of VMs. You are already there, right? So it's not a replacement of your current data center VMs in this environment. It's a service that you are very carefully planning and deploying as your roadmap, maybe as your private cloud, maybe as your hybrid cloud. But it's just not, in my viewpoint, it doesn't make sense to have Azure Stack to replace your on-prem VM. It's way beyond that. You can start offering platform as a service. You can start offering software as a service here. And that's where the beauty of Azure Stack is. So if you just limit your thought process here somehow by deploying Azure Stack, I can deploy more VMs. Perhaps that's not the right way of thinking it. The right way of thinking is that, hey, I'm just going into a new modern era, same interface, and I can extend the benefit of Azure that you have been using in Azure as a public cloud. Now my on internal network that I manage it, and I deploy it for different departments, different teams, different branches, different regions appropriately, right? So that's my thought process. I might not be 100% correct here, folks. I'm new to this. I don't know everything about Azure Stack, to be honest, but whatever I told you, I promise you, I'm going to share with you whatever I have learned so far. Maybe it is adequate, maybe it is not, but at least it gives you an opening. It gives you an idea of what Azure Stack looks like, and you're not, you're sitting in the corner and you don't know what Azure Stack is. In my viewpoint, this is a good starting point to learn Azure Stack and start working on Azure Stack, right? So, and as this process, you are all familiar with that. And we can create a new VM here just for this purpose here. Right, I'm gonna name it as a demo. VM. Again, my user here. I'm gonna use my name. So let's see what it says. Must be 12 and 123 characters, right? You're all familiar with that. I just wanted to make sure that we are following the same thing here and that, right? So let me make sure that I follow the password requirement. Okay. Okay, and now the resource group, you are all familiar with that. And I have my resource group here. I don't think I have created a network in that. I should have done that, but just to show you here, right? So why don't we do that? Let's just go back and try to create a network as well in this environment before we go there. So I'm going to try to create a network here, folks, and let's see if we are successful here. Network. in virtual network. You can see how many. This is fascinating when you have this BGP working behind it of all those public IP addresses created, right? That's pretty awesome and neat. I wish I could talk a little bit more about it, but I think we don't have much time here, right? So we don't have any virtual networks here, and no results. Can I create one? I don't think I have an option here. Public IP addresses. Wow. Okay, let's do this new networking. Virtual networks. Here you go. And I call it as demo and double K. I'm not going to do anything and leave it the way it is. Resource group. I put the resource group here. That's what I was talking about. Subnet. Location local. Obviously, I don't have any choice here because this is the Azure Stack deployment kit. Subnet default. Da da da. I can name it. Oh, where did it go? Subnet here. Demo 1, right? Create it. Voila. Now we can try doing virtual machine here, right? And I can create a virtual machine. Create it. Did I pick up the right image? Yep, create. Demo VM. Sorry, I have to do it twice. I should have planned better. And if I have a license, yes, I do have a license, so I will use it. I hope that license works that I have, and click OK. So here I have one CPU. Again, your standards here that you are familiar with. You can do all your availability sets and whatnot, right? So I'm not going to go into all those details. For me, this is 2016. Let's see if I have any other option here. I'm going to go with 2 data disks, 1 CPU, D1, D2, D. Okay, let's just do this. Go availability set I have not yet created, so you can create a storage account. It picked it up. Network, it picked it up. That with the one that we created. Subnet, it picked it up. The public IP address, it's getting it here. Okay. Network security group, firewall, the network security group, I don't want it right now, so I will say none. network security extensions. I don't need anything, right? So no, I don't need it. Extensions, click OK. Click OK. And deployment in progress, right? So let's see how much time it takes. I'm not gonna keep you waiting for that. Once the VM is ready, I'm gonna show you the VM, and that would be the end of the demonstration. I hope you find it useful. I hope you find it beneficial, and you may be able to play with Azure Stack in your own environment. Okay, let's just wait, and once this VM comes in, I'll show you the VM, and then we'll go from there. So folks, the VM that we were trying to deploy is successfully running. You can see it here. The demo VM that we were provisioning earlier is up and running, and it's the same thing that we have been all used to on Azure Public Portal or Public Cloud. We can hopefully connect it here. Open. If I can remember my password, then we should be good. And here we go. So one of the 2016 server VM has been deployed in Azure Stack, us up and running. While it's just coming up, I also want to show you one more thing here, that what I did here is, in terms of offering here, I created a new plan, and I call this plan as a plan for delegation only, right? So this is where we can test our users stuff here, right? And if you look into the services and quotas, the only service that we are allowing here is the Microsoft subscription, right? That's what I did. And then I also created an offer. And I called as offer to delegated, offer to delegate, basically. And in this case, offer to DP, pretty much everything that you need to do that. And then I went to the subscription, and I added a subscription here as JB Garden, right? JB Garden is our another person that could add as a user now, right? So JB Garden at lglmsft.us, which is one of my Active Directory user on-prem, and I gave him a delegated right. Then I went also on the plans here, or the another offer here, sorry, the one that we created earlier, the demo offer. And if you go into that demo and delegated providers, and I added the JB Garden here, right? So now with that, we should also be able to sign on as JB Garden and do the stuff that we want to try as a user from, you remember that when we talked about the cloud operator and a tenant. So now we are looking into the tenant side, and if I can just copy the URL here so I don't have to type it. Obviously you guys have to play around it and understand the delegation a little better. And here I'm going to try to log on as this user, sorry, and this user is enabled for multi-factor authentication, so hopefully that would ask me for a multi-factor authentication. I expect it. Perfect. ADFS. Perfect. Calling my phone.
For using the Microsoft Sign-In Verification System, please press the pound. Your sign-in was successfully verified. Goodbye.
And now he's logging on as a tenant, basically as a user, not as a cloud operator. And then he has got limited sets of services that he has. He can also invite additional users, additional folks, and keep doing what limitations we have provided in that offer that we created earlier, right? So now this particular user has the ability to do that based on the quotas, based on the settings that we did earlier in our earlier part of demonstration. And I think that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to discuss with you guys on this demonstration. I hope I have covered most portion of Azure Stack. Obviously, there is platform as a service and the web app and the fabric that you can still play with it. I don't think that's the purpose of this demo. The purpose of this demo was to show you how to deploy Azure Stack on a nested VM on a hypervisor, and make sure that we can register it, make sure that we can download the objects from Azure directly from Azure in the marketplace. We have seen that. We have also seen that we can deploy VM. We have also seen that we can initiate and delegate, create plans and offers and delegate it to a subscription. And that's why the user can log on as a tenant and they can do their job as well. That's pretty much it, guys, and I hope you like it. Once again, thank you very much for your valuable time. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for my next video. Take care.